Good evening, everyone. We are in the middle of Perek Daled of Iggeres HaTeshuvah. In last class, we started Iggeres HaTeshuvah. We started Perek Daled. And in Perek Daled, the Alter Rebbe begins to ask, what is Teshuvah? Not the technical question of what Teshuvah is, but how does a person really come to a firm resolution never to do Iggeres again and only to do what Hashem wants? Where does that come from? And then the Alter Rebbe also asks a bunch of other questions, trying to understand Teshuvah al-pi Kabbalah, that according to Kabbalah, Teshuvah is Tashuv Hey, and there are two levels in Teshuvah, Teshuvah Elad, Teshuvah Tata. And to understand all this, the Alter Rebbe, the Tanya over here, gives to understand what is the neshama of a Yid, and the intimate connection between the neshama of a Yid and the Eibishter. Why is that important? Because we're leading to a place where we're going to try to understand what exactly happens when we do an Avera. What is the damage that is done? And as we shall see, as it turns out, that the damage done is not only damage to oneself and to one's own neshama, but because the pasuk that the Alter Rebbe quoted, Ki chelek Hashem Amoy, which means that the Yidden and the Eibishter, there's a connection between them to the point that Yidden are pashat chelek of Hashem, they're chelek of the name of Hashem, chelek of Hashem's name. So therefore, damage done to a Yiddish neshama through an Avera also impacts the Eibishter, and that's going to lead us to a deeper understanding of why we have to do Teshuvah and what exactly Teshuvah is meant to accomplish and how we fix the damage that we caused. So we learned Ki chelek Hashem Amay. There's a essential difference between the neshama of a Yid and everything else that was created. Everything else that was created in the world was created through Hashem's dibur, through the Asara Mamaris. And as we learned in the last class, that is the chitzonius of Hashem. Dibur is chitzonius. Dibur is as Hashem relates to something that's outside of Him, and Hashem is creating something that's outside of Him. And the Yidden, the Neshamas Yisrael, is Vayipach Ba'apav Nishmas Chaim, that the Neshama of Klal Yisrael was blown in to the nostrils of Adam Rishon, and as we know, the Nafach, Metochi Nafach, that means that we come from the Pnimius of Hashem. In different words, we are not a creation of Hashem. Neshamas are not a creation, but Neshamas are actually an extension of Hashem's name. Chelek Hashem Ameh, which explains the incredible connection between Yidden and the Eibishter, like mamash, like the connection between a child and parents, which is why the Eibishter says, B'ni b'chayri Yisrael, b'ana matam Hashem alekechem, why we were called Hashem's children. Just like children are an extension of the parents, we are extensions of Hashem. That's what we learned last week. This week we're starting on page Tzadik Daled, which is opposite of page 186, 3 lines from the bottom, where it says Obir Inyan. This week we're going to learn what are the practical implications of the fact that Chelek Hashem Amay, that we are part of Hashem's name, we are an extension of Hashem's name? Where do we see that b'poel? And in brief, what we are going to learn today is that just like, Hashem has 10 spheres, and as we shall see, these 10 spheres are actually alluded to in the 4 letters of Hashem's name of Yud Kei Vav Kei. The same thing is, because we are a reflection of Hashem, so therefore within our neshamas also we have these same 10 components, which goes to show on the strong connection that we have with Hashem, that we're literally a reflection of Hashem. The fact that we can look at ourselves and therefore understand the way things are by Hashem is because of this idea that Ki chelek Hashem Amay, and because we are drawn from, we're an extension, a direct extension from Hashem. Let's do this inside. Obir Inyan, explanation of that which we said earlier about Ki chelek Hashem Amay, Kenaydam and Maimer Eliyahu. It is known that which Eliyahu Navi said, and this is in the Hakadama to Tikkun Ezer. The Hakadama to Tikkun Ezer begins, Pasach Eliyahu v'Amar, we say it in davening, that Eliyahu opened up and he said, and the treatise that he said over there, which we say the Pasach Eliyahu is a very, very basic and elemental in Kabbalah. It explains what the spheres are about. It's a very, very fundamental ideas that are elaborated over there. So one of the things that Eliyahu Navi says over there, he turns to Hashem and he says, Antu, you are the one, the apikas asar tikunin, that you emanated from yourself 10 ornaments. Vikarina lohoin, and we call them asar sfiran, we call them the 10 spheres. The word sfiram is from the word even sapir, a shiny stone. So spheres, in other words, these are the ways that Hashem shines into the worlds. La'anhaga b'hoin almin simen, and you use these 10 spheres, these 10 ornaments that you have, these 10 spheres, you use that through them you direct the hidden worlds, v'chulu, and as it continues over there, and also the revealed worlds. And Eliyahu continues and says, Ant Chakim, what are these 10 spheres that you have? What are these 10 ornaments? So number one, Ant Chakim. One of your ornaments is Chachma. One of the ways you express yourself is with Chachma. But, V'loi b'Chachma yediyah, not with the Chachma that we are aware of. Not the Chachma that we know of. In other words, it is Chachma, but it's infinitely higher and greater than anything that we can comprehend. Ant Maven, you have Bina, which is the second of the 10 spheres. But once again, V'loi b'Bina yediyah v'chulu, not with a Bina which we can comprehend and grasp and relate to. So, although we said earlier that Hashem has 10 spheres and we have correspondingly, we also have 10 koiches within our neshama, it is important to understand that there's a ein aroich, there is no comparison between the 10 koiches that we have in our neshama, the chachma, bina, chesed, gvura, etc. that we have in our neshama, and the way they exist in Hashem. A mashal that I saw is, imagine you look at a map. So when you see a brown spot, a brown area, so it's a mountain. And then you see a little blue line, a squiggly blue line, you know that there's a river over there. Now, is there really a comparison between a brown splotch and a mountain? Is there really a comparison between a little squiggly blue line and a mighty river with all that it contains in it? Obviously not. You might want to say that we are like a map of Hashem. So whatever there exists by Hashem, we have it also. But where by Hashem there's a river, by us we have a blue line. And where by Hashem there's a mountain, by us there's a little brown spot. So on the one hand, we do say, Mibsari ech zalika. We can look at ourselves and have some sort of hasaga, some sort of understanding in Hashem. At the same time, we really have to understand the limitations of this. Just like, yes, when you look at a map, do you have a general picture of the area? Yeah. And by the way, if you've seen mountains and you've seen streams, so that when you look at the stream, you know what it is. You see the river. When you look at the brown, you see the mountain. But imagine you've never seen a river, you've never seen a mountain, and you look at a map and someone shows it to you, and somebody, this is a mountain, this is you have no clue. So there is that tension. On the one hand, yes, as we shall see, everything exists within us, but at the same time we have to understand that it's in a much, much deeper and greater way. To use the words that Alter Rebbe will actually quote later on in this pedic, that's what it means. Dibra Torah Kalashin B'nei Adam. Once again, when I say that, we're missing Satson over here. But Dibra Torah Kalashin B'nei Adam, that when it means the Torah talks human language, we have to understand it's not pshat that by the Eibishter it's the same thing, but we have certain human terminology that we use to give us an idea about larger things. Two lines from the top. V'chol hayud sfireis, and all the 10 sfireis nechlalis hu nirmazis b'shem havaya baruch hu are all included in the Shem Havaya. So let's unpack that a little. We know that Hashem has many names, and every one of the names of Hashem, in the words of, as the Medrash says, Lifi Maisai Ani Nikra, that these names aren't essentially for Hashem, because Hashem himself is nameless. No name can describe Hashem. As it's brought down in the Zohar, Hashem himself is Lo Yisramiz, B'shum oitz or b'shum koitz, the Eibishter himself, there is no, forget about a word, there isn't a letter, there isn't even any line that can describe and define Hashem. And that's why, if you look in the Sifrei Chassidus, when the Eibishter says, we just had Shavuos this past week, when he says, Anoichi Hashem Alikecha, so Hashem and Alikecha are taka names, but Anoichi is higher and greater than all of that. I, because that's the Anoichi, that's the I of Hashem, which transcends and is beyond names, beyond the different ways in which Hashem chooses to manifest himself and to express himself. So we have different names. We have, for example, you have, so when Hashem expresses himself in a way of chesed, so we have Shem Kel is chesed, Gevura, Shem Elikim, etc., etc. The name, the Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is the most essential name of Hashem, is higher than all the other names, which is why it is the Shem HaMeferesh. And what is, but it's not the essence of Hashem. But what is it? Yud Kei Vav Kei spells out the word which means the one who causes creation. In other words, the root of the word is Hoiva, or that which is, or Havia, which means creation. With the Yud beforehand, Yud means the power that makes it come into being, like Ya'aseh or Yoichal. So the Yud beforehand, this is the power that causes all of creation. So when Hashem lowers himself down to be the source of creation, that's when we have the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. But that's the highest name that we have. Because before Hashem lowers himself down in order to make creation, there are no names for Hashem. And then there are other names. The other names represent specific ways in which Hashem relates to creation. Whereas the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is known as the Shem Havaya, is very general. All the powers of creation are in there. But as Hashem then manifests himself and behaves and expresses himself in different ways, then we have the other names of Hashem. So therefore, the 10 spheres, which are the tools with which Hashem creates everything, it's understandable and it makes sense that these 10 spheres are embodied in the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, because Yud Kei Vav Kei is the building blocks for all of creation, as are the 10 spheres, so they're really one and the same. And as we shall see, the Yud, as Dr. Rebbe will proceed to say, the Yud is Chachma, and the Hey is Bina, and the Vav are the 6 Midos, and the last Hey is Malchus. And again, this is the Yud Kei Vav Kei represents or contains or comprises the 10 spheres. So it is the power in the 10 spheres in the Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is what, as Dr. Rebbe quotes from the Tikkun Ezer before, that these 10 spheres, Lanhaga V'Hain Alman Stimen, that this Hashem controls and manages and directs all of creation. And as mentioned, this is why there are so many that we've mentioned in previous Shiurim, that this is why so many areas of creation are divided into 4. Because everything is sourced in the Yud Kei Vav Kei, and everything is sourced in the 10 spheres, which, as we'll see now, the 10 spheres are divided into 4 groupings, and that's why we have 4 directions, Mizrach, Ma'ariv, Tzaf, and Adarim, and there are 4 seasons, and that's why there's Daimim, Tzemeach, Chaim, Medaber, and the 4 elements of Eish, Ruach, Maim, and Afar. There are the 4 worlds, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, and the reason why everything is into 4s is because the source of everything is the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei, and the name Yud Kei Vav Kei again comprises the 10 spheres. Inside. All the 10 spheres are contained within and alluded to by the name of Havaya, the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei. How is that? Ki hayud she beginnes nekuda levad, the Yud, which is only a nekudam, it is a dat. Miramezes l'chachmasa yizbarach, that refers to Hashem's chachma. She beginnes helam v'hester, which is essentially hidden. Koidem shaba lebechinas hispashtus v'giluy asaga v'havana, because chachma is that which is before there is hispashtus. Hispashtus means the widening and the spreading of an idea, the enlarging of an idea, and before it becomes revealed in intellect, that's what Chachma is. Chachma is before the revelation and before an idea is able to expand. So a yud essentially is a dot. And a dot doesn't have any dimensions. It doesn't have width, and it doesn't have length. If it does have width and length, it's because you made the dot too big. And theoretically, cut it a little. And once you cut it a little, if it still has dimensions, again, you made it too big, cut it again and cut it again. But until you get to a place where there are no dimensions. Now, we can probably do something that has no dimensions, but theoretically, a dot doesn't have to have dimensions. Its idea is, as opposed to every other letter in the aleph beis, which needs to go one way and another way, the yud at its core is a dimensionless dot. And the idea of a dimensionless dot represents chachma. Chachma is the first of, when we're talking about the revelation of the divine energy of the Ein Sof in worlds, the first revelation is one that is beyond understanding, beyond what the worlds can grasp, and therefore it remains hidden. It is a revelation of pure godliness. Now, it's somewhat contracted from the Ein Sof. It comes down into Chachma, but ultimately this is something which still remains completely hidden, and it is more the potential dot of everything, the potential energy of everything that will come. Now we know that if you look in the Sefer Torah, that on top of the Yud, on the top left side of the Yud, there's a koitz. A koitz means there's a little line that's sticking out upwards. So that line, that what's called the koitz of the Yud, that alludes to Hashem's Ratzon. Which is much higher even than the level of Chachma Vatzilos as is known. What is the significance and why does the Alter Rebbe add this over here? It's a good question. And we will return to this in Mir Hashem later. When I say later, I mean when we get to Perek Ches. We will come back here and we'll figure out why the Alter Rebbe decided that he had to put it over here about the Ratzon. Let's move on. After the light of Hashem comes down in a way that it already becomes expanded and already becomes revealed. It already is something that can be understood. However, right now it's still in the concealed worlds. So then nichlelas v'nirmezes bo'is hey. Then it is then this which is bina is included in and alluded to by the letter of hey. What is the hey? Sheyesh lo bechinas hispashtus l'rechev. The hey takes the yud and it widens it, and it gives it the width, it makes it broader, and also hamoida merabmiz al archava sabir of Havana, which shows on the expansion of an idea. V'gam lo oirach, and also it has length. Hamoida al bechinas hamshocha v'ashpa milmaila lamata. That means that this is the oir which eventually expands and comes down to a lower level. La'alman sesimin, to the hidden worlds. Okay, there's a lot to explain over here. So we have what's called Alman Sesimin and Alman Deis Galyan. And I believe we spoke about this when we learned Shar Yichud V'Amunah, which means the revealed worlds and the hidden worlds. When we talk about revealed worlds and hidden worlds, we don't mean revealed from us or hidden from us, because the Alman Deis Galyan that the Alter Rebbe is talking about over here, the revealed worlds are also hidden from us. We're talking about spiritual worlds, but nevertheless, these worlds are called Alman Deis Galyan, the revealed worlds. When we talk about revealed worlds or hidden worlds, we're talking about revealed from themselves or hidden from themselves, or hidden, revealed to themselves, as opposed to revealed to themselves or hidden from themselves. And the mashal that's given to this for this in many places in Chassidus is that in this world also, we have the revealed world that we see is the world which is on dry land. And then the hidden world is the world which is underwater. What is it? And both under the water and over here in this world, in the revealed world, there are many, an infinite amount of different creations and infinite amount of different life forms. Whether it's medaber, whether it's semeach, whether it's chai. However, everything that's under the water needs to be under the water. Take a fish, for example. If it needs to be under the water and it is completely surrounded by its source, its life source, which is the water, the fish is surrounded by its life source, and you take it out, it will die, and its connection to its life source is very obvious and very apparent. It is batel. That's what's called bittul. It doesn't proclaim independence from its life source. And that's why actually the halacha is that anything which is in the water is not, that lives in the water is not a chatzitza. If you want to, actually I'm not sure if this is the actual halacha, but it's brought down in the Mishnah. I don't know if it's the actual halacha lepoil. But if you, let's say you go to mikveh in a river and when you toivel, there's a fish that brushed up against you, or any life form that's in the water. Actually, it could be any sort of vegetation or any water life form. So it's not a chatzitza. Now, and why is that? Because everything that's in the water is batel to the water, so it's not considered a chatzitza. Over here, however, on dry land, even though that we also receive our sustenance from the land, and if we wouldn't have the land, nothing would exist without the earth. But nevertheless, that connection isn't apparent. We seem to be independent. We seem to be a metzias on our own. Alman di Isgalian, in the spiritual worlds, are those worlds we're in. The residents of those worlds they are completely cognizant of their makar, their shayrish of Hashem, to the point that they don't feel their metzias. As opposed to Alman Dis Galion, we have creations. We're talking about holy creations, malachim, etc. But where their metzias already becomes apparent, their metzias already becomes revealed. So, when Hashem's energy enters the different worlds, in the world of Atzilus, and then as the energy comes down, so the original energy comes down on Chachma. Chachma is the revelation of the divine light, a revelation of the divine light which is beyond comprehension. And because it's beyond comprehension, it's something which is, as we mentioned, it's dot-like, because it's like a kernel. In your mind, when you were able to understand something, essentially what you're doing is you're taking it apart, and you're building it. And you're giving it, as we mentioned, you're giving it width, and you're giving it width means that when you have, let's talk about in our experience. Sometimes there's the first essential kernel of an idea which we have, which is really beyond comprehension. It is more of an intuition, you might even want to say. A flash. And it's a flash, which is like a dot. It doesn't, it's not yet structured, and it doesn't yet have substance to it, doesn't have a body to it. And then we take this idea, and the next level, which is the Bina, which is the Hey of Hashem's name, is we take, and first of all, which is why it's represented by Hey, we broaden it. So that's the idea of broadening an idea, of giving it width, is you take an idea and you apply it to many different areas, you ask questions, you answer, and suddenly from being a very small tiny idea, you develop it and you develop it. But that's all lateral. You're busy developing the idea. And then if you're a teacher, you use your Bina not only to build the idea laterally, but also horizontally, which is why the Hey not only goes this way, but also goes downward. Because you need to take an idea and you need to apply it to simpler terms and in simpler ideas and bring it down to a lower level. But ultimately, the Bina, all of this is still Alman, this is Simen, this is all the hidden worlds. We're talking about hidden by Hashem. Because in Kedusha, Bina, the Bina of Hashem is before really creations that are separate from Hashem, that are not batel to Hashem, are able to come into existence. Let's move on. And afterwards, when Hashem's light comes down even further lower, la'almin di isgali, to the revealed worlds, like a person, that he wants to express his chachma to other people, by way of speaking, for example. So when this happens, now this is included and alluded in the letters vav and the last letter hey, which is in Hashem's name. The vav, which is just a horizontal line, shows on drawing down the light from where it is above, in the Almin, the Iskasyan, in the hidden worlds, Lamata, down here, lower to the revealed worlds. This Hamshacha is through the Midah of Hashem's Chesed, V'shar Midois of HaKadoshis, and the rest of Hashem's holy Midois, Hanechlales B'derech Klal, which in general are included by Mispar Sheish, in the number 6. Shebepasuk L'cha Hashem HaGdula, in the pasuk of L'cha Hashem HaGdula we have 6 Midois. Ad L'cha Hashem HaMamlacha, through the words L'cha Hashem HaMamlacha, V'le'ad B'cha, but not including L'cha Hashem HaMamlacha, because L'cha Hashem HaMamlacha is Malchus, which is the 7th. So there you have L'cha Hashem HaGdula, V'ha'gevura, V'atiferes, V'hanetzach, V'hahoid, and then Kichol B'shamayim V'ha'aretz, which is, Kabbalah explains, that's a reference to Yesod. So there are 2 reasons over here why the Midos are alluded to by the letter Vav of Hashem's name. One, because what the Vav is a drawing down of the light from the Alman, the Iskasyan, from the hidden worlds, to the Alman, the Almin, the Isgalian, to the revealed worlds, and also because Vav, the Gematria, the numerical value of Vav is 6, which alludes to the 6 Midas. We'll do another 2 lines, and then we'll pause a little and try to give a little explanation. Ki midas malchus yizbarach nikras b'shem dvar Hashem. Hashem's malchus is called the word of Hashem. K'mesher Kosev, as the pasuk says, ba'asher dvar melech shilton, that the king rules by way of speech. V'nechlelas v'nemezes bo'is he'achrena. This malchus is alluded to in the last letter of Hashem's name, which is the last hey of Hashem's name. So what we've done over here, let's recap and let's try to add a little explanation. So we've done over here, we've gone through all the midas, all the 10 spheres, and shown how they correspond to the letters in Yud Kei Vav Kei. So the Yud of Hashem's name corresponds to Chachma. The Hey of Hashem's name corresponds, the first Hey of Hashem's name, that is, corresponds to Bina. The Vav of Hashem's name corresponds to the 6 Midas, and the last Hey of Hashem's name corresponds to Malchus. What is the correspondence of Malchus, of the Hey to Malchus, which is Dibur? And in a moment we'll explain the connection between Malchus and Dibur. And Alter Rebbe will explain this soon, that Hey, number 1, has the numerical value of 5. And we know that there are what's called Hey Mitzoyes Hapeh, that when we speak, there are 5 different groupings of letters that are articulated in different ways. We spoke about this at length also in Sharichud Vamuna. So therefore Malchus, which is associated with Dibur, which is associated with Hashem's speech, therefore is connected to the letter Hey. And also, when you speak, when you all speech begins as a Hey. Hey is a simple breath. When you emit a sound, a plain sound, it starts off as a Hey, and then afterwards it takes form. So therefore all speech is rooted in Hey, which is Malchus, which is associated with Dibur, for reasons we will explain soon. But let's back up a little and talk about this again. Once again, remember we said we are the map. So let us look at the map and see the way it is by us, and then we'll have a little better understanding of what we just said now, the way it is by Hashem. Because all of these things that we just discussed about Hashem, the Chachma and the Bina and the Midas and Malchus, which is Dibur, we all have them also. And again, by looking at the way we have them, we can understand also the way it is by Hashem. And why do we have them? As explained, because Ki Chelek Hashem Amoy, because essentially we are reflections of and extensions of the divine of Hashem. So in the process in the Nefesh, the highest level that there is in the Nefesh is called Chachma. And Chachma is something which is above and beyond understanding. Chachma are things that either extend from very, very deep inside of us, and there are certain things that we know. There's certain things we know, there's certain things we believe, there's certain things that we take for granted. They're not necessarily logical, but they come from a very deep place, higher than seichel. It's more like something that we see rather than something that we understand. It's something that we perceive to be correct. Chachma is truths that are higher than understanding. However, these truths, the Chachma, we take them and we do think about them, we do contemplate them, and eventually to a certain degree we're able to understand them also. And when that happens, that process is called Bina. So Chachma is the flash of truth, which comes either from deep inside, a higher part within us, or sometimes it comes from the outside of us. We get some sort of flash of inspiration from outside of us, but then we take it in our minds and we build it and we develop it and we structure it. And like the hay, again, we build it laterally, we build it horizontally, and that is Bina. Chachma and Bina, both of them, especially the way it is by Hashem, we're talking still Almin de Iskasya. They're hidden worlds. Just like in the human being, our intellect, our Chachma and Bina are very personal, they're very private. Our understanding, our comprehension has nothing to do with anyone else. This is the way we are within ourselves. And that's why it's Alman de Iskasya, they're hidden. It's hidden from everyone else. As we all know, someone who's a highly intellectual person is someone who is a hidden person. Doesn't relate much to others. In Chassidus in general, although we know we all like oir, we like light, and choshech isn't optimal, but in Chassidus in many places it's explained that there's a choshech that's higher than oir. When we talk about Yoshev b'seiser elyon or Yashes choshech sisrei, it's because there's a choshech, a darkness which is higher than oir. Darkness which is higher than oir means Hashem as He is for Himself, or the energy of Hashem, Hashem's chachma, Hashem's bina. These are all hidden. These are all hidden. These are all transcendent and above and beyond creation. And then we have the Vav. The Vav brings everything down into Alman, the Isgalian, into the revealed world. Suddenly, there are other entities. Why are there other entities? Because the Vav represents midos. The Vav represents emotions. And what are emotions? Emotions are essentially about others. It's a feeling that you have about others. The two primary emotions are chesed and gevura. Chesed is a feeling of closeness, a feeling of love, affection. And gevura is a feeling of distance, a feeling of withholding. Both of those come into being in relation to one another. You know, we mentioned before, an intellectual person is a hidden person. An emotional person is a revealed person. And that's why you might want to say an intellectual person occupies Alman Diskasyan. An intellectual person is more living in a hidden world, living in their head. Whereas an emotional person is constantly busy relating and responding to everything that's going on around him and around her, because the idea of emotions is gilui, is the idea of is revelation. When we talk about Ki sheishes yamim asa Hashem as Hashemayim v'sa'aretz, that Hashem created the world with sheishes yamim, with 6 days. The 6 days referring to the 6 midos. Why are the midos called days? Because midos are revelation. That's Alman Disgalyan. So that's the light of Hashem coming down lower. Again, the light begins with the Yud, with the Chachma, which is an undefined light. The Hey is already where the light takes on definition, which is why suddenly the Hey has a shape, as opposed to the Yud, which because it is definitionless, it also is shapeless. But then we take a drastic descent with the Vav, as indicated by the shape of the Vav, and we enter Alman di Isgalia, the revealed world, and that is where suddenly Hashem begins relating to worlds, creating the worlds. After all, it is the Midas that created the world, actually created the worlds. And then you have the last Hey of Hashem's name, which is Malchus. Malchus, which means, and also Dibur. What are the connection between Dibur and Malchus? And by the way, these are things that we've discussed on many different occasions, especially in Shar Yichud V'Amunah, where this was discussed at length. Dibur, speech, is something which a person is complete without speech also. Speech is only about me being able to communicate all that I have within me to someone else. I am complete without that. The only deficiency that a person would have if they can't speak is that they might be a complete person, a tzaddik, and a person with incredible intellect and wonderful midas, but they can't convey it to someone else. So you might say that dibur is not about, it's not a shleimus in the person. It's not, it doesn't add shleimus. It's just a tool for a person to be able to convey of his or her shleimus, of his or her perfection, to someone else. Malchus, royalty, is very similar to that. Think about it. Imagine you have a person who is absolutely excels in limud haTorah and in mitzvahs and in midos and in leadership skills. He has everything. He's a person, mamish ha'adam ha'shalom, mamish a perfect person, a perfect specimen. But imagine this person lived on a desert island. There was no one there. Would we be able to call him a melech? And the answer is no. Ein melech b'lei am. But why can't we call him a melech? He's a perfect person. And the answer is, a melech is not about being a perfect person. A melech is a person who, has many different milos, many different skills and qualities and wonderful attributes about him. But what makes them the melech is that they're actually a melech over am, is that they actually communicate all those skills into reality and to the reality of the nation that they lead. So that's why Malchus is very similar to Dibur, because both of them are about, it's really not relevant, the greatness of the person. It's not about the person, it's about the person as they relate to others. And there's a difference between Midas and Malchus. Midas, which is the Hey, and the Malchus, which is Dibur. Sorry, Midas, which is the Vav, and Malchus, which is Dibur, which is the last Hey of Hashem's name. Both of them are Alman Dias Galion. Both of them are already part of the revealed world, because both of them are about the other. But there remains a difference. Midas, my emotions, are about another, but they're still within myself. They're me as I relate to others. They're my feelings about someone else. My emotions are still me. Action, on the other hand, is not me living, and therefore, by the way, Midas I can have, Avram Avinu, and the mashal that's brought down in Chassidus many times, Avram Avinu. So he personified, he exemplified the midah of chesed. And one day there were no passers-by, there was no one to do achnasas archim with, because Hashem made it very hot after the bris milah. And Avram Avinu was very bothered by that. Why? Because his midas ha-chesed was still working, even though there was no one around. Because the midah of chesed, you can have the midah of chesed, live on a desert island and have the midah of chesed, but you can't actually do something which is chesed, or speak words of chesed in a meaningful way, if there isn't someone else around you. So yes, the Midas is one level, but Midas is Alma de Isgalion, it's the revealed world, but the revealed world still as it is within me, it has not yet expressed itself outwards. When, however, that Midah comes down into speech or action towards another person, that's another level lower, that's already Malchus, which is the last Hey of Hashem's name. So there we have the entire process of the divine energy of the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, which is invested in creation, and how this is reflected in the 10 spheres. So again, we start with the Yud, the undefined energy. We move on to the Hey, which is energy which is defined, but still, this is before the energy yet has any relationship yet with creation, with the world. Next level, which is the Vav, the Midas. Here is now where the world already appear, but they appear as they are within Hashem. They have not yet actually emerged on their own. They're like a Midah, which is my feeling about you, but it's still my feeling. And then the last Hey, this is where, from the last Hey is where creations actually come from, because the last Hey, which is Hashem's Dibur, the Asar Mamaris, that is the actual source of all of creation. I want to point out that this week there was a very special anniversary. Now, I'm sure there were many special anniversaries this week for many special people, and if you had your anniversary this week, Mazel Tov. But I'm talking about a specific anniversary. 120 years ago, on Yud Aleph Sivan, was the marriage of Reb Levi Yitzchak Schneerson and Rebbe Tzemchana Schneerson, the parents of the Rebbe. And some events at the time, they might not be recognized for what they are. At that point, Reb Levi Yitzchak was already at that point a renowned scholar who got married to the daughter of a prominent Rav in the city of Nikolaev. I'm sure it was celebrated, but I don't think anyone had any idea exactly how monumental and fateful that marriage was. And Vayam Elin is Karm V'Nasim. Today's the anniversary of any event is significant. The anniversary of every marriage is significant. But today we have the anniversary that produced the Rebbe. The Rebbe who fundamentally altered the face of Yiddishkeit following the Holocaust. 120 years, and Yom of Me'av Mishana, which is a big deal. So I want to take a moment to talk a little about Reb Levi Yitzchak. Reb Levi Yitzchak was the Rav in a city in the Ukraine, which at that time was called Yekaterinoslav. He became the Rav over there when the Rebbe was 7 or 8 years old. And Reb Levi Yitzchak was a goin in every way. He was a goin in Nigla. However, there's no question about it. Reb Levi Yitzchak, what he's most known for is he was a mekubal of a rare sort. His mind was constantly thinking Kabbalah. I don't know if we mentioned this in the past. And he's always speaking Kabbalah, speaking the Pnimiyas HaTorah. That we have various Sfarim that survived, that are printed today, and we'll talk about that in a moment. In one part of one of the Sfarim that he has, a significant part is called Iggeres Kodesh, is his letters. And what are the letters that we have preserved? So, the Rebbe left Russia in 1927. The Rebbe was engaged to the daughter of the Frierdiker Rebbe Simcha Mushka. And when the Frierdiker Rebbe was effectively expelled from the Soviet Union in 1927, after he was miraculously released from prison, that's a story all for itself. So the Frierdiker Rebbe was allowed to go together with his family. At that point, the Rebbe wasn't officially part of the family. The Rebbe was engaged, wasn't married. So when the Frierdiker Rebbe told the authorities that he's taking along our Rebbe, so they objected. He says, your daughter's only engaged, she can find another husband. To which the Frierdiker Rebbe responded that a husband like this I'm not going to find anywhere else. So the Rebbe joined the Frierdiker Rebbe when he left Russia in 1927, and the Rebbe went out to Latvia, eventually to Berlin and France. And the Rebbe's parents remained behind in the Soviet Union. So at that time, from the time when the Rebbe left Russia in 1927 until the Rebbe's father, Levi Yitzchak, was arrested, we'll talk about that in a moment. He was arrested in the year 1939, right before Pesach in the year 1939. So they corresponded regularly. The Rebbe corresponded with his father. And what did they correspond in? Obviously, it was all words of Torah. And if you look at the letters, it's Taket Torah. And there's also a lot on there's also a lot on Gemara and on Shas, but it's mostly Kabbalah. And even the Chidushim on Shas are mostly Kabbalah also. And there's a letter from the Rebbe's father to the Rebbe where he writes to the Rebbe, I thank you very much for the Divrei Torah that you wrote to me, but Chaval, you have to try to put in more Kabbalah. You have to put together the Nigla and the Chassidus together. The Nigla and the Nister, the Pnimiyas and really in this way he followed the derech of his great grandfather, the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe of Lubavitch, who also his expertise was bringing together. We all know he was a Goyin Olam, he was one of the biggest poiskim of his times. but at the same time, everything was together with Kabbalah. I guess the bigger chaval is that the letters of the Rebbe didn't survive. In other words, what survived, the Rebbe, when he escaped Nazi Germany, he took along with him all the letters he got from his father, and they were published later. The Rebbe published them later, but we can only imagine the Chidushei Torah that were lost. Who knows? Maybe they weren't lost. Maybe one day they'll be found. That would be such an incredible simcha. But they probably were lost. The Nazis came into Yekaterinoslav in 1940, 1941. I'm not sure exactly when. They destroyed the whole Jewish community over there. Pretty much everyone was killed out in Simchas Torah of 1941, including the Rebbe's brother and the Rebbe's grandmother. But the Rebbe's father remained behind in the Soviet Union, and he was again the Rav in the city of Yekaterinoslav, which is the second biggest city in Ukraine, and he became very much the go-to person for Chassidim. They had questions, they would go to him because the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, was already at that time wasn't in the country and communication was difficult. At a certain point in time, they had to move the body of the Rebbe Rashab, of the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, because where he was buried, they were going to make a train track over there. And the Frierdiker Rebbe, who was at that time in Poland, he instructed the Chassidim in Russia to go to Rabbi Yitzchak and to do exactly what he said. He was a very respected personality. And he resisted the government in many ways. He remained the Rav, and the government did not like that, obviously. And again, he was arrested in 1940. And of his many ksavim, many writings with his Chidushei Torah that he had, so almost nothing survived. What did survive? He was arrested and he was sent off to the far off Soviet province of Chile. It's a tropical place where there were no Yidden whatsoever. There were peasants and mosquitoes there. And he was there for 5 years, a very difficult period of his time. His wife joined him there also, Rebbe Chana, and arguably that saved her life, because that's why she wasn't in Yekaterinoslav when the Nazis invaded. And when their son, Rabbi Ber, Shem Yikim Damai, was killed by the Nazis, along with all the other Yidden of the city over there. But she joined her husband. And what did she do over there? I mean, she took care of her husband, who was already an elderly person and wasn't so well. But one of the services that she provided for her husband, which the Rebbe spoke about many times, is that she knew how much her husband wanted to write Chidushei Torah. So she would go out to the field and she would pick berries and different herbs, and she would cook them, and she made ink out of them, so that her husband should be able to write his Chidushei Torah. But there was no paper there to be had. But what did her husband have? Her husband had a Tanya and a Zayir. Rabbi Yitzchak had a Tanya and a Zayir. And what he did was, he filled the margins with his Chidushim. And these Sfarim were eventually smuggled out of the Soviet Union, the Tanya and the Zayir, and today they're in the Rebbe's library. And it's fascinating. You look at them and you see the ink, and you see the ink on the sides are different colors, because she didn't always produce the same colors. Some is red, and some is blue, and some is black. And they were published. The Rebbe started publishing them in the late 60s, and then in the early 70s. And from that point on, every Shabbos Farbrengen, the Rebbe would choose one of his father's Chidushim and elaborate upon it. And the Rebbe would explain many times. He would say, my father, because of the lack of ink and the lack of paper, he wrote everything very briefly. And everything there is very cryptic. And therefore, we really need to unpack and develop everything that he writes. And sometimes he writes something and you don't realize that he's really answering bigger questions and addressing huger issues, which he didn't have the space really to write. So he wrote it, therefore, somewhat in code. And relying on us, that we'd be able to further develop the ideas. And that's what the Rebbe was always doing, further developing his father's ideas. So, this is the Likutei Levi Yitzchak on Tanya. This is just his Aras on Tanya. The Aras on Zohar take up four very thick Sfarim. If I didn't have this mic attached to me, I'd bring them out and show them to you. Take them out 1 second, I'll show you. So these four Sfarim, this is the set. This is the set of which again all this comes from. This is all from two sources: the Rebbe's the letters that he sent to the Rebbe, which is half of this sefer over here, and then you have the other Sfarim. One of them, this is Zohar. This is on Zohar Bereshis. This is on Zohar Shmois through Devarim, and this is Chidushim Biyurim L'Shas Mishnah Gemara. And then we have over here again the Ha'aras and Tanya. Now in the Ha'aras and Tanya, I want to focus on something he talks about in our Perek. So again, there are many Ha'aras and Tanya, and because of their Kabbalistic content and nature, I don't usually talk about them, to be honest, because there's a very, very Kabbalistic bent to all the Ha'aras. But I figured on this special week of the special anniversary, so I'd want to talk about a certain Ha'ara. And the Rebbe explains how this Ha'ara really brings light and really answers a much larger question in this Perek. However, we're going to learn the Ha'ara now. We're not going to have the time today to explain how this Ha'ara illuminates the Perek, and that we're going to have to leave Iggeres Hashem for next week's lesson. So the Ha'ara is as follows. In the Tanya that we just learned, the Alter Rebbe says the words Chastoi v'Tuvoi. Where is it? Here. V'gam hamshacha zu hi ayidei midas chastoi v'tuvoi. That this hamshacha of the vav comes down through midas chastoi v'tuvoi, the chesed and the goodness of Hashem. V'shar midos of hakadoshos, and the other holy midas of Hashem. So on this, the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Yitzchak, writes as follows: Nokat beis l'shonos. The Alter Rebbe over here, he uses over here two different terms, chesed and toiv. Hashem's chesed and Hashem's goodness. Chesed v'toiv. Hu ha'haschala v'hasoif da'shisha midas. That is the beginning and the end of the 6 midas. Sha'haschalasan chesed, because the first midah is chesed. The soifan, the last of the midas of the 6 midas, is yisoid. Hanikra toiv, and yisoid is called toiv. Kamei Shekosov, as the pasuk says, I believe in Yeshaya, Imru Tzadik Ki Toiv. That the Tzadik is Toiv. So therefore, if Toiv is if a Tzadik is Toiv, and Tzadik is Yisoid, Tzadik Yisoid Oilam, so therefore Chastoi v'Tuvoi, Chesed is referring to the first Midah. We know there are 6 Midas: Chesed, Gvura, Tferes, Netzach, Choid, and Yisoid. And Yisoid is the last. The Yisoid, which is Toiv, is the last Midah. The tzaddik hu yisoid, and tzaddik is yisoid. Boiker da Avraham u boiker da Yosef. This is the morning of Avraham and the morning of Yosef. The Gilui, morning means revelation, which is explained in Zohar HaKadosh and Parshas Balak, Daf Reish Daled, V'ayin be'Biuri HaZohar Sham, and take a look in Biuri HaZohar over there. So Avraham obviously represents Chesed, and Yosef represents Yisoid. So you have the boiker of Avraham and the boiker of Yosef, and that is the Chastoi v'Tuvoi. That's why the Torah brings down Chesed and Toiv, because Chesed is the first of the 6 midas, and Toiv is the last of the 6 midas. Okay, so that's just, it would seem that this is just just taking words and showing, why did Alter Rebbe, there is no extra words, there's an allusion here to something deeper. But as mentioned, the Rebbe expands this idea and explains how with these words, the Rebbe's father is actually, again, dispelling and answering a huge question that exists in this Perek. Iggeres Hashem, next year we will continue in the Perek, we'll finish the Perek, we'll understand what the question is. The question is actually somewhat of a glaring question. By the time we finish the Perek, we'll understand it. We will then return Iggeres Hashem and see how Rabbi Yitzchak's Ha'ara answers the whole thing. Have a good Shabbos, everybody.